First off, if there's anything I can offer that's quick, one thing to be said is a few books to read in a certain sequence. They are Tribe by Sebastian Junger, 10 Arguments for Deleting Your Social Media Accounts Right Now by Jaron Lanier, and lastly, The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck by Mark Manson. Why these books in this order? Glad you asked. First off, Tribe is written by a man who I would have wanted to be at one point when I grew up. He's an independent journalist who ended up at one point being a war correspondent in the Afghan War. He made 2 documentaries and wrote a book about it called War, which I also recommend. But Tribe is basically a really long research paper in book form that outlines the paradoxical phenomena of people expressing higher mental health, well-being, and sense of purpose during times of conflict, be it in war, riots, or natural disasters. The ultimate argument of the book is that these occurrences take us back to our more natural state, our more human roots, and that the modern world is increasingly removing us from these roots. The second book is written by a man who was there in the beginning of Silicon Valley and saw early the writing on the wall that spelled out the dangers not only of social media, but modern media in general. In summary, social media companies algorithmically put their users into smaller, isolated bubbles of paranoid, self-righteous fear and anger for the purposes of increasing advertising and product consumption. The end result is someone who's self-centered, functioning on arrogant nihilism that lives like an addict might, who blames the world for their problems and all things that are wrong and seeks the quick highs of buying things, sharing links, getting angry and outraged, and ultimately living in a smaller and smaller universe. I'm sure this sounds like a lot of people you know. Lastly, a book on how the modern world has fucked up people's values to where perpetual discontent and, once again, what I've come to call arrogant nihilism are celebrated as perspectives. More people are isolated and unhappy. The answer is to understand that ailments and problems in your life may not be your fault, yet are indeed your responsibility. So, in summary, part 1 is an understanding on human nature, how we are and why the world is fucking that up. The second is a more specific view on how nefarious and pervasive a major part of that dynamic is, and who is indeed to be blamed for it. And lastly, part 3 is at least part of the answer. The rest, really, is up to you. Alright, moving the fuck on now, and time for the big info dump. Get comfortable. Part 1, one of my favorites, was where 5 Israeli men were seen watching the 9/11 Trade Tower attacks with what appeared to be happiness, filming what was going on. They were found with tons of cash and fake passports. They apparently worked for a moving company that was rapidly shut down all of a sudden. The FBI speculated, and even some agents concluded, that these men worked for Israeli intelligence. It seemed, to me at least, they knew what was going on before at least the news did, or knew what was going to happen before anyone else did. On a related note, if we're supposed to be defending Palestine and claim Israel is indeed an apartheid state, why is it that trans Palestinians are killed in Palestine and seek asylum in Israel? And that one time that the Palestinian representative to the UN, in opposition to the US potentially scrapping a 2-state solution for the eternal Palestine-Israel conflict, stated, "If this is what they want to force on us, one-state reality, the Palestinian people will accelerate the reproduction machines, i.e. women, and increase the number of Palestinians to face apartheid," he said. Translated, if we don't get what we want, we're going to rape our women and force them to birth more of us into suffering. They're literally using their victimhood and the fact that everyone else cares about them as a threat, and referring to women as reproduction machines. Just take some time with that one and try to wrap your head around the kind of mind frame a statement like that would come from. Oh, and that time Yasser Arafat said, "The womb of the Palestinian woman is a biological weapon, which he could use to create Palestine's state by crowding people into the Gaza Strip and West Bank." And we're supposed to be defending these people. Lastly, here's why Palestinians are also not accepted anywhere else in the Muslim world either. My thought is they are to be used as a weapon against the one and only ethnically Jewish state in the world. The more their brothers and sisters in Palestine suffer, the more value they have to the rest of the Wahhabist world. Speaking of the Middle East, here's opium production in Afghanistan. What year did we invade again and release all those drug lords there? Here's that same image paired up with a growing heat map of drug overdoses in the USA, most of them opiates. Oh yeah, not too long after, Saddam Hussein switched to the euro from the dollar for petroleum sales and netted quite a bit of money. A month later, we invaded based off of the lie that there are weapons of mass destruction there. Like that time, Gaddafi was going to create a gold-backed currency to defy the global financial system, and then NATO bombed his country into the Stone Age. Another word for this is monetary imperialism. Since then, it's become a failed state with a massive slave market, next to Mauritania, which also has a huge slave market as well. And not a lot from the UN about this either. If we're so concerned with slavery, especially of blacks, I ask why so few even know of this in the first place. Switching gears here, 91% of plastic waste is not recycled. You can blame China, India, and Indonesia for dumping most of it into the ocean. Naturally, it's the responsibility of Western nations to do something about that, and thank God we banned the straws because of that one sea turtle. Next up, carbon greening. Yes, carbon dioxide is causing mass greening of the Earth. More green means more oxygen. There are about 1 billion other things that means too, most of them X factors that we have yet to notice, but notice how oxygen levels are never something you hear about in the great climate debate as something we need to be worried about. Speaking of the environment, whenever you see a headline come out about how somewhere specifically is becoming 2 or even 3 times hotter than everywhere else, chances are there is some other article somewhere else about scientists from that place specifically stating the same thing. That this one place is 2 times hotter than everywhere else, along with somewhere else that is also 2 times hotter than everywhere else. And that doesn't make sense. This isn't how math works. And this is because it is a deliberate misrepresentation of the data. I have found so many of these that I'm just going to let the images run here for a second because there's just so much to put up. Speaking of astroturfing, notice how all of a sudden Anonymous came back out of nowhere and conveniently started attacking foreign enemies of the West, but not the governments of the West themselves? Weird, huh? Another fun little thing to come out because of COVID was a document accidentally made public by the UK government stating that the British people expressed a reverence towards the UK government during COVID. It was essentially a long document on how easy it is to control people if done in the name of safety. I wonder where they got inspired by this from. Speaking of the UK government, one thing that needs to be put on blast more is the decades worth of Pakistani, specifically pedophile gangs that have run rampant throughout Britain. Gangs referred to as Asian, because to state otherwise would be racist. Gangs that the police did nothing about for the same reasons. The police who outright stated they believe that these young girls, some as young as 8, were consenting, and how the numbers behind all of the accumulated gangs in terms of victims is absolutely fucking staggering. Speaking of the exploitation of children, the California Department of Education came out a bit ago stating that they do not believe in natural gifts and talents. What this means is they don't believe people are born with higher aptitudes towards certain things than others. This is, of course, in the name of equity of outcome, and is based off of what is called tabula rasa, or believing people are born as a blank slate. This is an effort to get rid of advanced placement classes, but it's also an incredibly disturbing kind of thinking from a government, basically expressing the belief that people can be molded easily by the educational system. Similarly, the Portland school system stated it's a good idea to start teaching kids that the idea of genders is because of white imperialism. And evidence of this is because Native Americans believe in something called two-spirit people who embody both masculine and feminine characteristics. This is borderline cultural appropriation from white big city social justice liberals twisting Indian beliefs to their own ends and transcribing their own ideology onto it. I know what two-spirit really means, and I can tell you that it doesn't mean that.